Good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this morning at 10 a.m., we have special edition with Betsy Wurzel.
Yay!
Yay! So, good morning, Betsy. How are we this morning?
Good morning, Lillian. I'm doing much better now. I woke up with a migraine with this weather that we're having in New Jersey. Hot, humid, little rainy, but took my medicine and I'm pumped up.
Good to hear. So, what part of grieving are we going to be discussing this morning?
Lillian, one of the listeners last week sent me a personal message, and they wanted me to discuss post-traumatic stress syndrome. So I'm going to do that. And I just want to say thank you to all the listeners because you warm my heart and fill it with joy. When people tell me they're celebrating their anniversaries, their birthdays, because Matt and I inspire them, that really fills me up with joy. And when someone says, Betsy, I'm going to post my husband's life and show his life, because you inspired me. That's why I do what I do, Lillian, and the other viewers out there. This is my passion of why I do what I do, because I want to help people. And thank you, Lillian, for giving me and many others a platform on Passion World Talk Radio. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about my own experience. You know, I was thinking, I did look up post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was going to read from a piece of paper, but to me that's boring, and I don't like to be boring, and I can't see to read with my glasses on. So I would
just have to do it lip sync.
No, I just can't do that. So what are some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? It could be anxiety. It could be depression. It could be that you can't function. You're on edge. You feel more stressed. You're getting nightmares. These are some of the things that I have read. I urge everybody, go on Google and look it up for yourself. And I just want to say a disclaimer here. I'm not a therapist. I'm telling you my own experience. Seek counseling. I do. Okay. Seek professional counseling. And I want to give some resources, Lillian, before I start. If you're a veteran, go to your VA, call them up. Of course, you can't now, I forget because of the pandemic. Call them, go online, reach out to your senior centers like I did. They do free counseling over the phone, or they could maybe send you to a resource. Go to a mental health clinic in your area. Some of them are sliding scale fee. What that means is you pay according to your income. Go to a place that is a behavioral, like here in New Jersey. Can I mention a place, Lillian?
Go ahead.
We have Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and attached to it is a mental health facility in Piscataway, New Jersey. Call them up. My mother-in-law actually was an outpatient there. There's your County of Aging, your Alzheimer's Association. They can guide you where to go for resources. Also, if you are employed or your spouse is employed or your partner, ask about the Employee Assistance Act. I was able to get free 8 mental health visits through Matt's insurance, through his employer. So ask about that. Don't be afraid to say, I need help. Because you know what? At one point in our life, we all did. We all need help.
You also may want to contact the AARP. People
Yeah.
laugh, but they have multiple divisions within that company. So call up on the one line that they have, the 1-800 number, and tell them why you're calling, and they will get you in touch with the right division who will help you out. That's what the AARP is all about, is to help people like us who are seniors, and that can be anywhere from 55 plus these days. And if you need the help, call them up. And again, there are graduating levels of payments. Some of them, they waive the fee aside if you have Medicare, or they waive it aside if you have Medicaid, because they're out to help you. There's one other definition of PTSD. I've had it to me, and it's when something that horrible has happened to you and you keep on seeing it repeatedly, or it wakes you up at night, or 25, 60 years later, you can still describe in great detail what happened to you. I have that. And you'll take it to your grave. Unfortunately, you'll have it to the day you die. And who knows, you may carry it into the afterlife. Because I say that whatever type of behavior you have during your life, if you become a ghost, you become that person and have that behavior in the afterlife. So, just a thought.
Yes, thank you, Lillian. I also want to mention, Lillian, that if a person feels that they need to be in a mental health facility, go. And if you don't have insurance, I don't think they can refuse you. There's charity care. I don't think they can refuse anybody. When you go to emergency room, they can't refuse you. You might need a referral. It depends on your insurance. If you have insurance, I would call and say you need a referral for an in-house stay. And some people do need to be in an in-house facility, and that's okay. Don't worry about people's judgments, because you know what? They're not you. And go ahead, Lillian.
No, all I was going to say is that you have to remember you're taking care of you. There's nobody else who's going to be taking care of it, because you were the original caretaker to start out with. So you're the only one who knows what's going on inside your head and what's going on within you spiritually or religiously or however you want to put it. So you have to listen to yourself when yourself says something is wrong. We need help.
Absolutely.
You need to listen to learn to that inner voice.
Yes, yes. And you know what? I'm going to speak from my experience, because that's the only thing I have to go by. But I can tell you, I worked as a licensed practical nurse. And I'm going to be very blunt here, because that's who I am. I wrapped up bodies. I have seen people die in front of me. But when it's your spouse and it's your loved one, that's totally different. And when people would tell me, well, you know what to expect, why should it come as a shock? Because people, I'll tell you why it comes as a shock.
Death is a shock.
Yes, you know what to expect. But when you see it in your face, and it's your loved one, it's totally different. Totally different. And Lillian, I want to tell people, no matter what dementia your loved one has, or even if they have cancer or whatever illness, doesn't have to be dementia. It could be any illness, a long-term, no cure sometimes, especially with dementia, there's no cure. They don't necessarily die of that dementia. They could have an infection. They could have pneumonia. They could have a stroke. They could fall, hit their head, and they die suddenly. And I have met people whose loved ones with dementia or cancer died suddenly and unexpectedly. So when someone dies suddenly and unexpectedly, and especially if you are witnessing that, that's traumatic. Let's call it what it is, people. It's traumatic. And if you have a long-term illness, and you see a long-term transition, as Matt had, and you see your loved one deteriorate, it doesn't matter that you know they're going to die. Okay? You are losing your partner, your loved one. And I had nightmares for 2 weeks. I kept seeing Matt in a body bag. And finally, I stopped dreaming about that.
It's when I went in to see how Barry was doing, and there he was, and I said, oh, he died during the night. And I looked at him, and it was gut-wrenching. It was different than seeing people die on TV or see people gunned down maybe on the street somewhere, because you are not emotionally attached to them. But seeing somebody who you loved, who you've been with for 30 plus odd years, who you took care of, who was living and breathing 24 hours previously, and now he's just this waxen, cold body. There's no life in him, and yet you still lean over to kiss him that one last time to say goodbye. And it really does rip the veil of everything that you've been taught to believe or have believed in, that the man you married is no longer there. So please, folks, when you allow your children to watch these movies or TV shows, or you allow them to play these games with realistic figures in them, please remind them that it's nothing compared to having your loved one laid out on a bed with a sheet wrapped around him like a cocoon. It's just not the same. It's real death, not make-believe death.
Yes.
And you have to know the difference and respect this difference, and respect the body that once was someone you knew and loved and cherished.
Very well put, Lillian. Yes, and some children, they get desensitized from TV. Oh, they'll come back. They're not really dead. They'll come back. And there is no
coming back. No, it's final. It's final. Especially when the mortician is waiting for you to get out of the room so that they can take the body and either embalm it and put it in the casket or get it ready to put into the oven. And that's real too.
Yes. Yeah, there's a whole lot to be said, Lillian, for caregiving post-traumatic stress also, and then you add the grieving on top of that. I liken it, Lillian, to, I feel that I survived the war. And no, I wasn't in another country holding a gun or rifle and having bullets and bombs at me. I was in the war for my sanity, to keep my sanity and keep my health through this. And it is traumatic, folks. And unless you have been through it, there's really no way that you can understand what Lillian and I, so many thousands and thousands of others, have gone through. When I was taking care of my mother-in-law, and you're talking, I went to a therapist probably 17 years ago, 16 years ago, and I talked about post-traumatic. I felt that I had post-traumatic. No such thing. I was always ahead of my time. There's no such thing. Fast forward with Matt, 5 years ago, I told the therapist, I believe I had post-traumatic, and I told him what I was experiencing. He said, yes. Now they're recognizing it, Lillian. Now they're recognizing caregivers have post-traumatic stress. And if you are a caregiver now, or you were a caregiver, recognize that and be kind to yourself. And when you go for therapy, I just want to say this, when you go for therapy or counseling, you yourself have to do the work. Yes, you could read self-help books, you could go to a counselor, but you as the individual have to want to help yourself. And that's where the real work begins. It takes a while. There's a thing called widow's fog that I found out. And sometimes I feel like I'm just in a fog, not getting things done like I like to. And I need to be kind and patient with myself. We experience all these, emotions, and then we think about, and part of post-traumatic stress too, you feel guilty. It's an unjustified guilt, but you feel guilty. Did I wait too long to put my loved one in hospice? Should I have interviewed more hospices? This is what I thought. Should I have changed hospices? What could I have done different? I even felt, did I kill Matt? Did I, said, okay, medicate him? Did I hasten his death? These are the things people feel. No, I did not hasten his death. It was his time to go. His body was breaking down. His body was dying. No matter what hospice I would have called, Matt would have died anyway. I'm going to sound heartless, but that's the truth. I have post-traumatic stress where if I go by that hospital, and that hospital already gave me post-traumatic stress 10 years before when I was in there as a patient and getting drains put in and horrible experience. So I already had it when Matt went in there. I start literally shaking, Lillian, and crying when I pass by this hospital. And unfortunately, my neurologist moved across the street from that hospital, and I freaked out. And I wasn't expecting it. I just started freaking out, and I was yelling at the hospital in my car. I looked like a crazy lady in the car. But
I know that. I still, Barry's been dead almost a year. Died September 24th. Do you know I still question myself whether I made the right decision? And maybe I should have let his doctor save him. And then I know I made the right decision. I know he said peace, but you still doubt your decision, and you'll doubt it for the rest of your life because a caregiver is given the power of life and death over your spouse. And even though you feel you made the right decision, because you're talking about a quality of life here, you still wonder if indeed you did the right thing. So not only do you have PTSD, but in some ways you're questioning whether you are a murderer of killing your spouse because you made the wrong decision.
So true, Lillian. So true. And, here on Chatting with Betsy on Saturdays, we're taking the lid off of this topic, and we're going to be very blunt. And I love the fact, Lillian, that you speak your truth. I love that. And this is where Chatting with Betsy, we speak our truth. And this is the truth. You do question. I was questioning it over and over again, and sometimes I still do. And Matt will be gone. He's gone 7 months. And yesterday was his birthday, and it was a very emotional day. I was like a seesaw, up and down. I celebrated Matt's life, but I, missed the fact that he's not here. Do I want him back sick? No, of course not. And
but you want him back.
Right.
And you can't have that. Right. Incidentally, light a candle for him. Yep. He'll feel better.
Yeah,
That's what I did for Barry's birthday. I lit a candle and put it by his picture. Yes.
That's a nice idea. I honor
a nice white candle. Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea.
Not that it takes away your guilt and anything, but it makes him feel better.
That's a good idea. I have to be thankful, and even in this time, I think gratitude is really important. I'm grateful for the fact that because of Matt, I met wonderful people. I went in my car and I became an advocate. That's how I met Jeanne White, station manager of Passion World Talk Radio. She saw one of my videos and contacted me to do an interview. Then I was on her show, and she gave me my own show. Did I think I'd do this 5 years ago? No. My dad, he had Alzheimer's. He would be proud of me. But because of Matt, I became a better person. And even though with post-traumatic stress and feeling the guilt, I had to think of Matt's whole life, not just concentrate on the last 2 weeks or the last month, which was brutal, but his whole life. And I thank God for Matt's journey, which helped me be a better person. And it's, a lot of work. I was talking to my counselor the other day, Lillian. I get counseling every other week on the phone. And she said, Betsy, find out what your triggers are. What are your triggers that set off your grief, and avoid them? And like, wow, I never thought about that, Julie. Her name is Julie. I never thought about that. Now, one of the things that set off my grief a couple of weeks ago was giving away Matt's glasses. I know I'm not ready to give away his clothes. I'm not moving anytime soon. That's okay. I'm not going to cause myself stress by giving away his things if I don't want to. There's no time limit, folks. And if I would like to give advice, if you've never been a caregiver, don't tell people things like get over it. I mean, I know I talked about that before, and I'll say it every week. Don't tell people it's time to move on and get rid of their things, or because you're not them. There's no timetable. And I have I guess you call it a analogy, Lillian. I equate grieving with clothing. Sometimes it's heavy like a winter coat, and sometimes it's light like a windbreaker or a sweater, but it's always with you, and it's a part of you. Some days are heavy, some days are light, and that's the way it is. And I heard a coach recently on a seminar saying it is what it is. Now, I never liked when people said that to me, but when she put it as,
like that.
It is. It is.
It is done. You cannot make improvements on it, make additions to it. You can erase it, but your memory won't. Your memory will keep it close for a long time.
Yes. And it is. It is what it is, because you had this disease, or your partner had this disease, you went through it, or your parent, whoever it is, and it's done. You can't change the past. You can only go forward. And I know caregivers feel guilty for something. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. And a lot of it is unjustifiable guilt. You can only do what you know of at the time, the information that you have. And this is why, Lillian, I stress education. I'm not putting anyone down. We need to be educated. The medical community needs to be educated. Be an advocate. If you see an injustice with your loved one, you need to speak up. Don't worry about ruffling feathers. You need to ruffle feathers. You need to speak up. Now, when you have had a bad experience, like I did, with a hospice, I feel like I might have more trauma in a way, because here I waited to put Matt on hospice thinking I was going to get help, and all I got was aggravation and more stress. And I can't change that, but what I did do is I filed a complaint. And not only did I file a complaint, I talked to the director of hospice. I talked to the patient advocate at the hospital. Oh, they thought they were dealing with a little quiet, meek housewife. Little did they know. I'm a spitfire. If you feel you weren't treated right, do it politely, but be firm. Call up Medicare's Levant if your loved one's on Medicare. That's what I did. And place a formal complaint. I can't change what happened to Matt, but what I can do is complain, make them aware, so that nobody ever gets treated like that again.
Or if you really want revenge, make sure that they're treated like that when they go into hospice.
Yes. Now, karma is a you-know-what.
Yes, karma can be a bitch.
I don't know if I could say that. Yes.
Well, this show is X-rated. It's not for kids. Although from the mouths of 7-year-olds, I've heard a lot worse. So we're okay. But no, it's like that. I was lucky. The hospice that Barry received was really good. They did a good job, and I was quite happy with it. And he wasn't conscious anyway. He was on drugs to keep him quiet, so he slept his way into death. Is the only way I could put it.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
started giving him the morphine on Sunday, and he just slept for the week, and he was pretty much dead by the end of the week. But he was dead long before he was officially dead.
Yes, I understand that. And sometimes, Lillian, and I know caregivers suffer this. You think you wish your loved one would go already. Then I even told Matt to go. And then you might think, oh, that's terrible to say. It's not.
It really isn't. When he was in the hospital, I kept on saying, die, Barry. You're not going to be happy if you live. Die. And the doctor heard me say that. And he says, he believes in saving everybody because he's a doctor. And he was very upset that I was saying those things. And I said, let me get something straight. You're not taking care of him 24/7. You're not going to have to be there for him 24/7. And I said, so it's all well and good for you to say, save him, but he doesn't and won't have a life after this. So to me, he's better off dead than alive.
Yes.
My doctor wasn't very happy when I said that, but I knew in my heart that was the truth of the matter. And that's something you have to come to grips with, people, whether you like it or not. You're just going to have to acknowledge what the present reality is and then decide for the good of your spouse what's going to be good for them, not for you. This is not about you. And if you want your spouse alive because you're afraid to be alone or you don't want blood in your hands, it's too bad, because when you marry that person, you already have blood on your hands because you're accepting the role of somebody who's going to be there for them and to care for them in sicknesses and health. Those are your vows.
Very, very good, Lillian. I applaud you. That's the honest truth, folks. I would say to Matt sometimes. Now, people might think I'm awful for saying this. I would say to Matt sometimes, "Can you just die, please? Can you just go?" I didn't want him to go through the suffering.
Yeah.
And he did. And I would say to him, it's time for you to go. You were a good soldier. Now it's time to cross that finish line. And people would say, but Betsy, you wanted Matt to die. Why are you upset that he died then? Because
it's different. It's one thing wishing somebody dead, and then there's another thing when they die, because you still have this guilt. Our society provides, or not provides, instills in you a guilt for your loved one, and you can't win. If you don't take care of them and die, it's your fault. And yet if you let them have the opportunity to die so they don't have to be in pain anymore, well, it's your fault again, because it must be something you did wrong that they want to go and let themselves die. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy and almost like a self-fulfilling suicide. And then in any case, you're the one who will be blamed for his death. My son said to me, I would have given all his money, for all his money to keep him alive. And I said he did not want that. So, folks, listen up. Being a caregiver doesn't end when your beloved spouse dies, because you're still going to be on the wrong end as far as the rest of the family, the doctors, the nurses, hospice. It's still you who is going to be at the root of everything. And you're going to have to accept that.
That's true. We make decisions. That's why having a living will, advance directive, so important. I can't stress that enough. I'll say it every week if I have to. So the light goes on in people's heads.
Yeah.
It's not
We both had living wills.
Mhm.
My doctor asked, do you want me to save him if I could? And I said, no, there's no point in it because he'll just get sick all over again. And I said, I don't know about you, but I don't want to keep on meeting you at the hospital at 10 o'clock in the morning and you telling me you don't know why he has pneumonia and a blood infection for the third, fourth, or fifth time because you didn't understand it, why he had it in the first place.
Yes. And to see him suffer when Matt was losing weight, people are a trip. Matt started to lose weight beginning of 2019. Then he continued to lose weight, even though he was eating. And people saying, aren't you feeding him?
Yeah. Yeah. Barry lost 30 pounds in the hospital. And they said, what? Isn't he getting a good enough meal? And I said, he just stopped eating. He just didn't feel like eating anymore. And I said, I bought him all kinds of chocolate and baked him all kinds of chocolate stuff, and he just wasn't interested. And when a person who loves to eat loses interest in food, you know that they want to go, that they have no interest. I mean, he couldn't take his pills anymore because he didn't know how to swallow anymore. And they couldn't figure out how to get the pills into him. So he couldn't take his medication even if he wanted to because his body literally forgot how to swallow. And when that happens, you're really fighting, as they say, an uphill battle.
That's right. And that's why you need to honor your loved one's wishes and know what they are. Matt already had a living will. He didn't want a feeding tube. So the neurologist said, well, he could get a feeding tube put in. And I said, absolutely not. Why would I do that to him? And he has a living will. He doesn't want that. Why would I make him suffer some more? When people are dying, I think people don't understand the process of dying either, Lillian. When people are dying, their bodies don't want food. They know they're dying. I believe they know they're dying. They don't want food.
They do know. They do know. My husband knew. When he told me I have no quality of life, he knew that I knew that he was going to give up, that he didn't see anything for himself in the future, or he saw no future for himself, I guess would be a better way to put it. And so that was that.
Yes, Matt knew he was dying. He would say to me, I'm tired, I'm dying. And he was seeing dead relatives, which
yes,
some people do see before they go. And they stop eating. And also, I think caregivers, they don't want their loved ones zonked out. But the alternative sometimes is, and they are agitated. And as a caregiver, you have to decide, do you want your loved one agitated or medicated? And it gets to a point you want them medicated. I had a medicated Matt.
Yeah, I chose medicated for him, and they gave him the morphine. And 4 days, I would go in there, stay practically the whole day, and I'd walk out more exhausted than when I walked in because it was an emotional ride. And with raw nerves, that's what you're coasting on. It's raw nerves. So, and like I said, when it's all said and finished, I went in there, kissed him goodbye, and left. And the mortician came in and took him out. Now, the funny part of it was when he was cremated, my 7-year-old, who was then 6, wanted to open up the box and see what the ashes looked like. And folks, you handle it gently, because on one hand, he accepted the fact that his grandfather was dead and had been cremated, and he wanted to see the ashes. Come on. I think that's awesome. But on the other hand, Daddy came to my rescue and said, well, we don't want them to fall out or scatter in places where they don't belong. You want Grandpa to be buried in one place so you can come and visit him. And so my grandson said yes. And so we avoided trying to open up the box to see Grandpa's ashes. But you have to give the kid credit. He was curious and he wanted to see what happened when the human body was burned. And in that sense, it didn't bother me because in his mind, that was still his grandfather. He saw his grandfather. He didn't see ashes. He saw his grandfather. And you have to understand that.
And they're curious.
And they're curious. Better he should ask to see Grandpa's ashes than to remain mute and not show any curiosity at all.
That's right. The children in the preschool, they would hear me talk about Matt. I would show Matt's pictures. And one of the children said, Miss Betsy, Mr. Matt doesn't look well. Can you make him better? And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I wish I could, but I can't. Why? And I said, well, because he's very sick and there is no getting better with this.
Yeah.
Oh, kids are very curious and they'll ask questions. And it's kind of cute in a way, like, oh, can't Santa Claus make your Mr. Matt better? I wish he could. I wish he could. And answer, if you have children, grandchildren, answer their questions about, they ask what happened to their grandparent. I think
why it's happening.
Right.
Because you'll be surprised. Several years later, they'll make the connection, maybe in a science class, and they'll come home and say, I figured it out. And you kind of look at them and say, figure what out? Oh, blue, blue, blue. And you go, oh, yeah, that happened 8 years ago. Trust me, they remember these things because the details are very important to them and they want to make a connection to whatever they learn further in school.
That's
so
right.
They themselves can arrive at that process that there's birth, health, sickness, death. And they accept the fact that's part of living, that eventually we all die. Some of us die in our sleep. Some of us will die violently. Some of us will die from a tragic accident. But death is a natural occurrence. You don't want them to be scared of death. And yet there are a lot of adults that are paralyzed by the thought they're going to die. Dying is a big deal. I don't understand why. You're born. You're going to have to die. I wouldn't want to live forever in today's world. It's bad enough living through what we're living through now. I don't want 4 or 5 more pandemics, if you don't mind. This one is doing a terrific job. But the thing of the matter is, eventually you die. You break down. Your body can take so much. So if you're thinking of living forever, unless it's also taking care of your body at the same time, you're either going to become a cyborg, which is part machine, to take over the flesh parts that finally give up, or you're going to die. And personally, I have no plans of becoming a machine.
Me either. Yes, this is what children have to learn. This is what our society has to face, Lillian. I agree. We are born and we die and we grieve. And it's part of life. And it has to stop being hidden in a closet or shoved under the rug. Oh, don't talk about that. No, we need to talk about it. And this is what this show is about. We're going, discussing what caregivers go through. And when someone dies traumatically, unexpectedly, a heart attack, a murder, horrific event, you're dealing with that shock, have to do the funeral arrangements. Yes, you are going to have more trauma because you have to process of what happened. When you have a horrible event that happened to you and you live through it, you're going to relive it. It's just part of it. Well, back when my dad, he was in World War II, they didn't talk about post-traumatic stress. They were just, here you go. I had to suck it up. They didn't talk about it.
Something else. They call it battle fatigue. I mean, it's been around since the Revolutionary War. And of course, during the Civil War, a lot of the soldiers who came home had battle fatigue. Let's face it, that was a brutal war. So that doesn't surprise me. But you can get PTSD from being raped, for being abused.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just going into battle, folks. Being held up in a bank at gunpoint, seeing a friend fall off the cliff. There are lots of nasty things out there that can happen, and your memory banks will keep on replaying it until you decide that the time has come for you to stop the mouse wheel. And that's when you need to go in and seek professional help to find out how you can protect yourself. I know that I have to stay away from romantic movies. Why? Because that's my trigger. And it makes me burst out into tears. Especially if a spouse is dying or has gotten hurt or whatever. I can't take it yet. So I stay away from romantic movies, especially where people are dying, because that just hits too close to home.
Yes.
So you have to protect yourself. I mean, I have a gentleman friend now, and he knows there's some subjects we stay away from because he knows he'll hear me start crying, and he doesn't want to hear me start crying. So he has learned to stay away from certain subjects until I really get over it. So it's something that you have to learn how to identify, and then you need to figure out a way of how to handle it to the best of your ability.
That's true. It goes back with, we need to, when we go to therapy, be honest with the counselor and or therapist, and to do the work. It's so important. And journaling, Lillian. Some people like journaling, writing down their feelings on paper. That was suggested in a bereavement group. I'm not a writer. I don't like to journal. I did journal with Matt's mom. Put down my angry feelings. I feel like it just got me angrier. So I don't journal. It's not for me, but it could be for someone else. There's coloring books, grieving journal coloring books. I just interviewed somebody last week with affirmations and coloring. That might be something somebody could be interested in. Going to a bereavement group. Personally, I just prefer a one-to-one. I don't want to, this might sound selfish, but I really don't want to be in a group where people are very sad and there's just nothing positive going on. I don't want that. I want to be in a more positive situation. So I don't belong to any, well, we can't do it now anyway because of the pandemic, bereavement groups. The one I was going to canceled at the first one. And I was more depressed after going to that first one with everyone talking about their situation. And I think of these poor men that were crying and probably not getting any resources because a hospice never contacted us. I followed up after they canceled. They never followed up with us. Finally got a letter.
Another suggestion: either do stretching, or do gentle exercise. You're gonna laugh, but I find that it takes your mind off your problems because you have to concentrate on your stretching. You don't want to stretch the wrong way. The same thing with exercising. You have to be careful. I do a lot of dancing. That's my exercise. But I use a lot of tissues, as they say, and ligaments and muscles and all that. And I get rather, well, crazy because even though I'm 69, my body still thinks I'm 22, I say. So the two don't always go together, but I'm having a good time. And that's what you need to do, is to have a yin to your yang, if you want to put it that way.
Yes.
Figure out a way that is going to reduce your stress and your discomfort. Go ride your kid's tricycle if you're incapable of riding it without training wheels. I haven't been on a bike in 25 years, and I know whatever next bike I have, I'll probably have 20 wheels on them because I don't have any balance anymore. But the fact of the matter is, take a walk, fly a kite.
Yes.
Do something outside.
Yes.
Get yourself involved in something. You don't need to join a group. I'm not a group joiner. I don't like groups. They kind of make me claustrophobic. Who said, But I have found that I can feel better about myself when I get out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need to do, is get out of your head.
Yes. I feel that if people were to find a passion and do that, they will feel better. I feel better when I do a show. I feel better when I post something. I'm a big kid at heart. Part of me is a little girl. I love to go on the swings in the park. I'm a big kid.
We need to start wrapping this up, but I am going to give our viewers, our listeners, a challenge, as I say. If you would like to come and share your grieving story, your PTSD story, or just share your feelings, email Betsy at
Sloan, SLOAN, Betsy 31 at gmail.com.
or LSC at Passionate World Talk Radio. And we will arrange to have you come on the air for 5 minutes to share your stories.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
And that way, you will feel a lot better. Now, you can answer just audio, or you can come on with video. Your choice, no pressure from either one of us. We just happen to love the camera, but not everybody likes the camera. So we're not going to put you in that position of having to have the camera on you. So if you want, like I said, we'll send you the invitation with the email. Make sure you include your email, and we will send you an invitation 10 minutes before the show begins, and you can come on and share your story. Sound like a good challenge?
Very good. I like it. Thank you.
There's no limit to this challenge. We will take it until the end of the year because, folks, the holidays are the worst for a caregiver. And most holidays in this country now start around September 30th. So you'll probably need a lot of support. So that's the challenge. You want to add anything, Betsy?
You're right, Lillian. Holidays, especially, I heard the first or the worst. And since Matt was in the hospital between, before Christmas and New Year's, it will be tough. And it is tough. Not everyone has a Norman Rockwell holiday. So just adjust accordingly. And with this craziness, who knows what's going to go on. But I want to thank everybody for watching and subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Speaker.
Excuse me. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Google and Apple Podcast. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, you all, Lily, for joining us this morning on Special Edition Betsy Wurzel and her producer, Lillian. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye, Lillian.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.